I remember the exact moment she said it. We were 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, the cabin lights dimmed, and most passengers asleep around us. She turned to me with this quiet intensity in her eyes and said something that would stay with me for years. But I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready for any of it. I was on a red-eye flight from New York to London, business trip, the kind I'd been taking for 3 years straight, ever since the promotion that was supposed to change my life, but mostly just filled my calendar with meetings I barely remembered. I was tired, not just physically, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. My marriage had ended 6 months earlier, not with drama or screaming, just a quiet conversation where we both admitted we'd stopped trying somewhere along the way. She kept the apartment, I kept the guilt. So there I was, boarding another flight, carrying my laptop bag and a book I'd never read, looking for seat 14F. And that's when I saw her. She was already seated by the window. Late 30s maybe, dark hair pulled back loosely. She wore a simple gray sweater and jeans. No makeup, no jewelry except a thin silver watch. What struck me wasn't her appearance. It was the way she sat, completely still, staring out the darkened window at nothing, like she was somewhere else entirely. I mumbled an apology as I squeezed past her to the middle seat. She glanced up, gave a polite half-smile, then returned to the window. I settled in, buckled up, pulled out my phone to pretend I had important emails to check. The flight attendants did their safety demonstration. Engines roared, we lifted off. I expected what I always expected on these flights. Silence, maybe a movie, sleep if I was lucky. But about an hour in, she spoke. "Do you fly this route often?" Her voice was softer than I expected, slightly British accent, though not strong. I turned to her. "Too often, probably. You?" "First time in 3 years." She said it like it meant something, like there was a story behind those 3 years. I nodded, waited to see if she'd continue. She didn't. The conversation could have ended there, usually did with strangers on planes, but something made me ask. Going home or leaving? She considered the question longer than it deserved. Both, I think. That's when I really looked at her, not just glanced, really looked. There was something in her eyes, a kind of weariness that felt familiar, like she was carrying weight she'd gotten used to but never quite accepted. "I know that feeling," I said quietly. She turned to face me fully then, studied my face for a moment. "I think you do." We fell into silence again, but it felt different now, less like two strangers ignoring each other, more like two people who recognized something in each other. Another 20 minutes passed. The flight attendant came by with drinks. We both ordered whiskey, no ice. That made her smile slightly. "Practical choice?" "Or a necessary one," I said. She laughed, quiet, brief, but genuine. "I'm Sarah," she said, extending her hand. "Michael." We shook hands. Her grip was firm, certain. "So what takes you to London, Michael?" I told her about my job, corporate consulting, projects that blurred together, hotels that all looked the same. She listened without the usual polite pretending, actually listened. "And you do this willingly?" she asked. "I did once, now I just do it." "There's a difference." "Yeah, there is." She sipped her whiskey, looked at me with those steady eyes. What changed? No one had asked me that, not directly, not like they actually wanted to know. I got what I wanted and realized it wasn't what I needed. Sarah nodded slowly, like she understood exactly what I meant. "I spent 5 years in London, working in publishing. Long hours, good money, believing I was building something important. What happened? My mother got sick, cancer, stage 4. I flew back to New York thinking I'd stay 2 weeks, help her settle affairs, then return to my life." She paused, traced the rim of her glass with one finger. "I never went back." The cabin lights were even dimmer now, most passengers sleeping, the steady hum of engines the only sound. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. Those last 6 months with her were the most honest months of my life. She stopped pretending, made me stop too. Pretending what? That I was happy, that my career mattered more than connection, that I could keep running from the things that scared me. I felt something tighten in my chest. Recognition, maybe. She died 3 years tomorrow, Sarah said. This is the first time I've been able to make this trip, going back to close out my flat, see a few friends, maybe figure out who I am now. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. We sat in that silence for a while, not uncomfortable, just present. Then she asked, "What are you running from, Michael?" The question hit harder than it should have. My ex-wife asked me something similar once. She said I was more comfortable being busy than being present. I got angry, told her she didn't understand the pressure I was under. Did she? Yeah, she did. I just couldn't admit it. Sarah shifted in her seat to face me more fully then. In the dim light, her expression was open, curious, but not invasive. Why couldn't you admit it? Because if I admitted she was right, I'd have to change, and change felt scarier than just keeping going. And now? Now I'm divorced and still keeping going, just lonelier. She smiled sadly. We are excellent at that, aren't we? Choosing familiar pain over uncertain healing. Is that what you're doing? Healing? Trying to. Some days are better than others. Another flight attendant passed by collecting trash. We both declined, held on to our empty glasses like they anchored us to the conversation. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "Sure." "When was the last time you felt genuinely excited about your life?" I opened my mouth, closed it, tried to remember. "I don't know," I finally admitted. "Years, maybe. Before the promotion. Before I started measuring success by how tired I was." "And what would excite you now, if you could choose anything?" I'd never let myself think about that question seriously. It felt indulgent, unrealistic. "I used to paint," I said. "Nothing professional, just for myself. Landscapes mostly. I had this small studio in my first apartment. Nothing fancy, but I'd spend hours there on weekends." "When did you stop?" "When I got serious about my career. Told myself I'd get back to it. Never did." Sarah looked at me for a long moment. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. "My mother told me something 2 days before she died. I was sitting by her bed, holding her hand. She could barely speak, but she squeezed my hand and whispered, 'Sarah, stop waiting for permission to want what you want.'" She paused. "Let that settle between us." I didn't understand it then. I do now. I felt something shift in my chest, like a door I'd kept locked was suddenly cracking open. "We spend so much time," she continued, "building lives we think we're supposed to want, chasing achievements that look good from the outside. And somewhere in all that building and chasing, we forget to ask if any of it actually makes us happy." The plane hit a small pocket of turbulence. Neither of us reacted. "What did you do?" after she said that. "I went home that night and quit my job. Not that day, but I started the process. Stopped pretending I was going back to London. Started admitting what I actually wanted." Which was connection, simplicity, work that felt meaningful even if it wasn't impressive. I started teaching creative writing at a community college. Make a third of what I used to, and I'm happier than I've been in years. I absorbed that. Tried to imagine making that kind of choice. "Aren't you scared?" I asked. "That you gave up too much?" She turned back to the window, watched the darkness outside. "Sometimes, but I'm more scared of reaching the end of my life and realizing I spent it performing a role I never auditioned for." That sentence hit me like cold water, because that's exactly what I'd been doing, performing. The successful consultant, the guy who always delivered, the man who measured worth in billable hours and client retention rates. And somewhere in all that performing, I'd lost track of the person I actually was. "Can I tell you something?" Sarah said quietly. Yeah. She turned back to me. In the dim cabin light, her eyes were steady, certain. I don't know you, Michael. We just met a few hours ago, but I recognize what I see in you because I saw it in myself for years. She leaned in slightly, lowered her voice even though no one around us was awake. You're exhausted, not just from work, from pretending, from carrying this version of yourself that you think the world expects. And the scariest part isn't that you're tired, it's that you've convinced yourself this is just how life is. I felt my throat tighten. But it's not, she continued. This isn't how life has to be. You're allowed to want something different. You're allowed to admit that what you built isn't working. You're allowed to change. She paused, held my gaze. You're allowed to stop waiting for permission to want what you want. The words hung between us. I felt something break open inside me, not dramatically, quietly, like ice cracking under spring sun. She was right. About all of it. I'd been waiting. For what? I couldn't even say. Permission, maybe, or certainty, or some external sign that it was okay to want my life to feel different. But sitting there, 30,000 feet above the ocean, talking to a stranger who somehow understood, I realized I was the only one who could give myself that permission. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice rough. I know, she said softly. That's how you know it matters. We sat in silence after that, but everything felt different. The plane announced we'd begin our descent in 30 minutes. Sarah pulled out her phone, typed something, then showed me the screen. It was an email draft, to me. If you ever need someone who understands, someone who won't judge the messy process of figuring things out, send me a message. I saved the address, nodded. Thank you for this, for saying what you said. Thank you for listening, really listening. Most people don't anymore. The plane began its descent, London appearing through the darkness below. We didn't exchange much more after that, collected our things, navigated passport control, parted ways at baggage claim with a hug that lasted just long enough to mean something. I never saw her again, but I still have that email address saved in my phone. I didn't quit my job the next day, or the next month, but I started making changes. Small ones at first. I rented a studio space, bought paints I hadn't touched in years, started spending weekends creating instead of working. I took fewer projects, said no more often, stopped measuring my worth by how busy I was. And slowly, over months, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Excitement. Not for achievements or promotions, for my own life. I think about Sarah sometimes. Wonder if she made it to her flat in London, if she found what she was looking for, if closing that chapter brought her peace. I hope it did. Because what she gave me that night, in that quiet conversation above the Atlantic, was something I desperately needed but didn't know I was missing. Permission. Not from her, really, but permission to admit that the life I was living wasn't the life I wanted. Permission to be honest about what made me happy. Permission to change. She told me something I wasn't ready to hear, but somehow, in hearing it anyway, I started becoming ready. And that's made all the difference. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.